And now it is my honor to pass on the microphone to Dr. Young-Sook to lead the session.
네, 이제 반갑습니다, 여러분. 세션 3입니다.
Ladies and
기후변화
gentlemen, good afternoon.
자연재해에서의 노인.
We are going to start the session on the theme of older persons in climate change and natural disasters. We have many online participants and 2 online speakers, and we have 1 speaker on site. So we have a total of 3 speakers for this session.
기후변화 자연재해에서의 노인에 관련되어
So under the theme of older persons in climate change and natural disasters, 3 speakers will deliver their presentations, and I will give 20 minutes to each speaker. And we have online participants, so if you have any questions, please ask the questions on the chat box so that we will pass the questions to the speakers, and then we will have a Q&A session to give you answers to those questions. First, we have Deputy Director General Fatimah Zuraidah Salleh of Ministry of Women, Family and Community Development of Malaysia is here with us today. We cannot give her a big round of applause, but please welcome her with sincere attitude. And second, we have Director Sari Mutia Timur from YAKKUM Emergency Unit of Indonesia, and she is going to deliver the second presentation, and please welcome her with a big applause. And last but not least, Professor Hong-Soo Kim is here with us today. Now she is next to me. Thank you very much for joining us today. Then without further ado, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Ambassador for Gender Equality, Young-Sook from Korea Women's Association United. Indeed, I'm working as an ambassador for gender equality, so I will take some questions regarding gender. So just for your information. Then first, Deputy Director General Fatimah Zuraidah Salleh will deliver her presentation.
Ms. Fatimah, are you there?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, shall you start from your presentation? Yeah.
I'm ready. All right, so may I? Hello, Madam Chair, may I?
Yes, sir. You can start. I can hear you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Okay, first and foremost, I would like to thank you for the organizer for having me to share an experience and best practices on special support systems for older citizens in Malaysia, especially during pandemic COVID-19. So please, next slide. And can we share? Organizer, do you have my slide presentation?
Slide. Would you please press the button of the?
Share slide.
Yes. Now you can do. Yeah. And would you please volume up your microphone as well?
All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but please volume up more. Okay, now you can start. I can hear you. Please go ahead.
So, as you can see in the slide, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see on the screen, this is our outline. First, I'm talking about the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on older citizens. The second one, we are going to talk about the Malaysian aging scenario. The third one is I'm going to talk about Malaysian older persons profile, as well as public measures, existing and future. The fifth one is about Malaysian national policy on aging. And after that, I'm going to talk about the special counsel, and the last one is about the policy and society. the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on all of us. And for your information and judgment, Malaysia is currently experiencing population growth at a rate that is gradually slowing down. According to the latest census figures in year 2020, Malaysia's population will add to 2.7 million. And at present, the number of Malaysians aged 60 years and above is estimated to be 3.4 million, which is 10.6%, and projected to become an Asian nation in 2030 due to drastic rise in fertility rate and increase in life expectancy. The Malaysian government movement control order, commonly referred as Hong-Soo, is a series of national corrective measures implemented by the federal government of Malaysia to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic in the country starting on 18 March 2020. The orders have been commonly referred to in local and international media as lockdown. I think this is a scenario all over the world. Instruments encompass restrictions on movement, assembly and international travel, and mandates exposure of business, industry, government, and educational institutions to curb the spread of the virus. The MSU was extended and flexed to different phases in 2020 and 2021, including the conditional movement control order and recovery movement control order. And several phases have been enacted nationwide, but other measures have been localized to individual states and federal territories on smaller areas. The movement control order was included in the National Recovery Plan, which is launched in June 2021. And the government also implemented the National COVID-19 Immunization Program. And for your information, all Malaysian citizens and non-citizens benefited from the program. And as of yesterday, on 26th of October 2021, a total of 23 million people, representing 73.2% of Malaysia's population, had completed their vaccination. And from there, 3.5 million elderly, so far 3,159,91 as of September completed both to and 3.3 million is still under birth. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to bring you in terms of Malaysia endemic scenario, which is increasing life expectancy has led to the increase of older age population. Life expectancy at birth has risen from 49 in 1960s to 75 in 2050 due to excellent mental health care, good diet, and high quality of life. It is projected Malaysia advanced from birth to 5 is a rate of 85 in the 2020. Malaysia is experiencing rapid decline in fertility. The total fertility rate has declined from 5 children per woman in 1970s to 3.0 in 1950s and lesser than 2.1 in 2010. During marriage, women education and increased participation of women in labor force contributed to this decline. Now, I would like to bring all of you in terms of Malaysia of reform. And according to Malaysian Research Institute on Aging, or YAKKUM, in Malaysia, can be categorized in 4 categories. 4 categories. First is about categories poor and unable. The second one is about poor and able. The third one is not poor and unable, and the fourth one is not poor and able. Majority of senior citizens fall under the fourth category with 61.2%, which are potential to contribute to the development of the country worldwide with 5.8%, who will need to be introduced to progress, which can generate income to sustain their life. And 81% of senior citizens will need government involvement to keep the inflation ratio and 4.1% anticipated government payout. involving the Indian society in each country's identity, resulting in the adoption of various frameworks for aging throughout the world. In employment sector, Malaysia has introduced first, it's about the National Strategic Development Plan of Aging Population. And this one is also about inclusion and employment of Malaysia's aging population. Second one is about employment part-time employees under the regulation on concern to encourage flexibility in workplace. And the third one is about the mandatory retirement age range from 85 years to 50 years for both public and private sector. And the last one is about the minimum wage order 2012 to enforce minimum wage to employees in private sector regardless of age. And also, Malaysia has adopted international guidelines towards the total employment protection and inclusion of the older population. Involvement at American International Plan of Action for Aging in the year 2002 and Regional Kuala Lumpur Declaration on Aging in 2015 has proven our track. Malaysia owns also the national policy for the elderly that the adoption of the required policy on national policy for all the person and plan action for all the person in 2011. This US policy is to develop a caring society, enhance capacity building, advance health and well-being, and address safety and social security of all the adults. And so far, Malaysia also has a conflict with implementation of the plan for the first Malaysia plan announced within the government highlighted issues in the improvement of activities, provision of accessible healthcare and utilization of ICT for all the persons. The ongoing plan emphasizes the need of a comprehensive database, and there is a need to provide accurate data by engaging in formulating policies, legislation, and strategies to cater to the needs of all the. I would like to share with all of you in terms of national policy for all the persons, which was developed on 2011. The philosophy of the national policy is to acknowledge all the persons as citizens with a variety of backgrounds and experience, have the right to enjoy a comfortable and respectful life and contribute to the development of the nation. And in terms of policy statements, the government's commitment is to create all persons who are independent, with dignity, high sense of self-worth, and respected by optimizing the self-potential through a healthy, positive, active, productive, and supportive aging to lead a well-being life. In terms of National Advisory and Consultative Council for the Ombudsman, it is the Chairperson, Minister of Human Family and Community Development. This is more on part of the governance in terms of taking care of the elderly and the government, especially the Ministry of Human Family and Community Development, was responsible to take care of all the persons in Malaysia. And in accordance with the policy, the National Advisory and Consultative Council for the Older Persons is established mainly to monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of programs carried out for older persons. The council consists of members from the various ministries and agencies, non-governmental organizations, private actors, communities, as well as individuals who have interest in community. And 7 sub-committees are set up under this council, which are led by various ministries and agencies, as well as Health, Ministry of Health, Department of Social Welfare, Education and Spirituality, Ministry of State Housing and Local Government, Ministry of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Human Resources, as well as Ministry of Science, Technology, and Innovation of Hong-Soo. And consultancies approved will with relevant stakeholders such as federal and state governments, other government agencies, academic and civil and the private sector. Sharing findings and receiving updates from the ground network of National Advisory and Consultative Council for the Older Persons also meet at least twice a year and is chaired by the Ministry of Economic and Housing, and Financial Services. Next one. Here, I bring in 3 dimensions of support for the elderly, especially during the pandemic COVID-19. The first is about the government, second, private, and the third one is about charity space. The policy strategies to achieve enabling a supportive environment for all the adults, including strengthening the human economic and the enforcement of laws pertaining to all the adults, accessibility and capacity building of organizations, and intergenerational independence through intersectoral and multidisciplinary approach involving various governments, ministries and agencies, non-governmental organizations, private sector, and also the community. Expanding on these 3 dimensions support approach, I would like to introduce our very own activity sector as national and sub-branches and
Within Power, the main
to encourage the community and non-government engagement in senior care. In budget 2021, the government has dedicated annual financial aid for each power or elderly center activity from 53,360 ringgit per Malaysia or 8,000 United States to 50,000 or 20,000 United States. This aid program and activity implementation in line with the concept of active and productive. This year, the government dedicating about 7.50 million to support the operation of 143 the elderly center activities as measured one. Apart from community-based programs, Malaysia also concentrates on institutional care. These institutional cares are designed to assist the less privileged persons in all daily life and functions. Example, we have activities provided into the structured and daily routine, rehabilitation, support, and guidance, recreational activities, and healthcare of treatment. Currently, we have Central for Active, or we call it in Malaysia, it's Timur and financed by the government. We also have 2 homes for chronically ill, called and financed as well as by the government. And we also have 389 centers run by non-government organizations and private registered under the care centers at 1993. There are many issues that need to be addressed urgently in the context of rapid structural changes in the Malaysian society and economy, especially during a pandemic COVID-19. Government acknowledges the gravity of the social expectations of our older persons and is committed to ensure our policy records and approaches continue to embrace the following areas. First, in terms of human rights and empowerment, second one of the participation in the community, the third one is about independent living, the fourth is strengthening We endeavor to provide the best for our older persons who have been the backbone of the nation. And I'm sure all of you have seen an impact through the short sharing session on Malaysia. Thank you, and once again for inviting Malaysia to be a part of the session, and we look forward to learning from all of these things as well. Thank you.
감사합니다. 아주 그 심도 깊은
Thank you
발표
very much for your
해주셨습니다. 파티마
in-depth
심의관님,
presentation. Thank you
발표
very much,
이후에 저희가 세분
Deputy
발표를
Director
다
General.
듣고 질의응답과
After
토론
taking
세션
all the presentations, we
때까지
will have
기다려주시기를
a Q&A
부탁드리고요.
session.
두
So please
번째
bear with us
발표로
till
곧이어
the end of the
넘어가도록
presentation.
하겠습니다.
Let me
두
move
번째
on to the
발표는
second presentation,
인도네시아의
which will
NGO인
be delivered by
야쿰이라고 하는
Director Sari
비상대책본부입니다.
Mutia
NGO
Timur of
이니셔티브에
YAKKUM
관련되어서
Emergency
지금
Unit of Indonesia,
우리가
which is an
말레이시아를
NGO.
통해서 정부의 이니셔티브에
So
관련되어지는
the previous speaker
논의를
talked
쭉
about the
진행했다면
governmental
두
approaches,
번째에서는 어떻게
and the second speaker
시민사회가
will
이니셔티브를 가지고
share
노인인권
initiatives
문제를
led by
해결하는
civil
것인가,
society
이 여러 가지
regarding
재난이라든가 기후와 관련되어지는 문제에서
rights of human rights of older persons.
아이고 제가 타이머를
So I just set the timer so it alarmed. So sorry for this inconvenience. So next presenter is Director Sari Mutia Timur.
나와 계신가요?
Are you there, Miss Sari Mutia Timur?
티머 이사님,
We have Director Samuri Mutia Timur online.
오케이. 네네. 지금 아마 인터넷 상황이
Due to
좋지 않아서
connection
발표를
issues,
좀 조정
maybe we need to
드리겠습니다.
postpone her
그러면,
presentation
우리
a bit
자리에
more.
나와 계십니다.
So we
서울대학교
have
홍수 교수님께서
Professor Hong-Soo Kim next to me, so I'd like to ask her to present her presentation first. You have 20 minutes. Please go ahead.
Hi, hi everyone. I'm Hong-Soo Kim. It's a great honor and pleasure to have this opportunity to share South Korea's experience. And the title of my presentation is Protecting the Health and Well-being of Older People in the Era of Climate Change, Current Status and Future Agenda in Korea. This is the contents. And yeah, global aging is, we are all the expert on the topic, so I will not go in detail, but Asia, as you see, is a very the rapid population aging is going on in Asia. And it also vary by the income level of the countries. In South Korea in 2021, people aged 65 plus composed 17% about of the population in Korea. By 2040, older people aged 65 plus are expected to account for about 40% of whole population in Korea. And recent statistics from statistics in Korea, Korea will become the world's most aged society by 2067. And the working population is expected to fall to 45%. This is a detailed country profile in Korea, so I will not go in detail, but several statistics might be interesting to you. But one thing I want to mention is, as the moderator said, the life expectancy has been increased rapidly, but still there is a gap between men and women. And this slide shows the burden of chronic disease in Korea. So South Korean people living and enjoying the long, lengthy life, but they are still suffer various chronic diseases. And the other important social situation we have to concern is high poverty rate of older people in Korea. the poverty rate of the older people in Korea is the highest among OECD countries. The share of poor senior was about 44% compared with the OECD average of 15%. Another important social phenomenon recently got attention is the increase in single household in Korea. Percentage of older adults living alone is 16% in 2000, and it increased about 20% in 2020. Single-person household registration is not only for older people, but whole Korean have hit a high of 40% for the first time. Middle-aged people in single person compared to multi-household people, and as expected, lower health and well-being conditions. In summary, under the rapid economic development over the last 40 years, South Korea has experienced increasing life expectancy, but also the society has experienced drastic social and demographic changes in family structure, disease burden, and it has come with high health and social inequality. Now all Koreans face another challenge by the change of physical environment as a form of climate change. So the pace of climate change in Korea has been and is predicted to continue to be faster than global average rate. And heat wave, which currently total 10 days a year, will increase more than threefold in 35.5 days by 2100. Sorry, there is a typo. And according to the recent abnormal climate report, also shows the climate change brought the high cost of property damage and causality. You will see the detailed statistic here. And especially for heat waves, the impact of health depends on socio-economic status, such as gender, age, health condition, income, education, and regional characteristics. Older women over 65 is very vulnerable, and also you see other lower level education and other factors all comes together. But as I presented earlier, Korean current older people and especially women have likely lower education and poor than older Korean men. So considering the high poverty rate and high disease burden in the later life of Korean men and women, especially women, vulnerable older people face multiple burdens and risks for more frequent and intense heat waves due to Korean climate change. Another interesting fact we have to consider is the climate change is unequally affected the lives of and well-being and human rights of older people. And the one is the geographic variation in climate change, older people's health. The impact of the climate change on health depends on the regional physical environment and vulnerability of the social structure. Poor urban dwelling older Koreans are more likely to have higher multimorbidity and lower neighborhood social networks, so they are vulnerable or high risk by the change of climate. But also the total damage in rural area is smaller than in city likely, but the damage area per person and the damage caused per person are larger than in cities, according to recent statistics. And this slide also shows the map. It shows the geographic variation in the climate change and older people's health. This and next slide shows how heat wave related to mortality risk varied by area and subpopulation characteristics. And also, heat wave related mortality is higher in socially isolated city-dwelling older Koreans. In summary, the impact of climate change unequally affects all the people in Korea due to their health and social vulnerability. In addition, the within variation in the vulnerability among all the Koreans is another important point. It has huge implications for human rights policy for the later life of Korean. And now we move to the policy and service efforts to respond to the climate change for older people in Korea. Recently, the government released the third National Climate Change Adaptation Plan. It's a 5-year plan. It's the roadmap how we adapt the new social and physical challenge. And Korean government also recently announced the plan toward the carbon neutrality. According to the national plan, Korea established KACCC, the Adaptation Center. It composed 3 teams: policy research team, adaptation cooperation team, and information and knowledge team. It involves 13 government departments, consists of 7 major sectors, including health and other sectors. The plan is to be adjusted, revised, complemented every 5 years. We also have principles for national climate change adaptation measures. There are several, but as you see in second, the principle indicate we have to consider of group vulnerability to climate change. And there are, because the very fast population aging, Korean government has various efforts to respond to population aging and try to protect their human rights. So here are several public policy areas for older people, but in that policy plan and proposal, you can see some climate change related component. For example, as for income support, it includes disaster recovery expenses they cover, government cover. For housing service, it supports for housing renovation for to respond to climate change. But no targeted and consolidated policies have not been well established. We also provide various public services for climate change. The listed items are measures to adapt for climate change with regarding older people. Especially for heat wave, we provide support for installation of air conditioner, implementation of environmental welfare service. We provide some counseling and guidance, and we also implemented and provide cool roof support for senior facility. For cold waves, similarly, we provide counseling and provide counseling-related visit and cold wave heating impact survey. We operate cold wave shelter and support for heating cost. Another point I would like to mention, South Korea is one of the countries very high-speed internet and cell phone penetration. We have high rates. All Korean, older people, about 98% have cell phone. So government and also private sector are very much interested about using this technology innovation to protect all the people in emergency situation. So you see here some approach or the pilot programs. And also recently, government and private come together and they do some AI-based emergency monitoring and emergency call services they provided. And Korean Telecom also implemented AI-based mobile health care. And now I move on what kind of lesson we can earn from international cases. For UK, it's the concern we have, the regional variation about the impact of climate change for older people. UK have already addressed that issue. So they implemented region-specific policy approach to adapt climate change. And UK also tried to engage older people in policy effort for climate change adaptation. The strategy proposed by Stockholm Environment Institute have several very interesting points. I will not go all detail, but number one, the abandon all stereotypes. Get to know your target audience. Use positive message, use the right frame, show real life example. These are all seem to be very effective strategy for engaging older people in CCA. We have to also consider this strategy to engage our older people in responding CCA. And also, this is US case. They try to promote health literacy and communication with older people on climate change adaptation issue. This is, I think, the last example, the Shopper project. This is an international project examined seasonal health variation and resilience in the urban older in London, New York, and Shanghai, and they addressed the exposure and vulnerability of aging population in the cities to extreme weather events, and has developed a new HVI for London. And they shows how we can increase the resilience of older people responding to the climate change, and how that approach can also benefit for increasing the resilience of the city. So the discussion. In summary, South Korea has experienced rapid population aging, and older people experience extended life expectancy with various health and social challenges. Various policy and services efforts have been actively implemented, yet health inequality is still a critical issue and significant impact the human rights of in the later life of Koreans. Climate change is a real social risk in Korea now, and policy and service efforts has been also developed and implemented. Although older people are recognized as a high-risk group for the effects of climate change, policy and services for climate change adaptation do not yet target this group well, nor are these efforts well coordinated. So for future direction, I would like to suggest we have to establish more aging-sensitive CCA policies are needed. Population aging policy and climate change policies should be better aligned, which could have synergistic effect. Older person-centered CCA services should be provided. A more integrated service approaches for each older individual with complex health and social needs should be provided. We also need better understanding of the diversity of older people by their health status, health condition, and socio-economic status, and where they live. Better monitoring and evaluation system for the effect of CCA on older people's health and well-being are needed. And also, this is, I think, is important. So far, Korean CCA policy for older people is pretty much protection focused. They all identify older people are very vulnerable. It's somehow correct, but when we see the international experience, more engaged, focused approach seem to be needed and could be very effective. So we have to think about what's the optimal mix of top-down and bottom-up approach in the Korean context. We have to commit to build a healthy and sustainable community under climate change the CCA policy should not only focus on individual person-based approach. You also have to build better, sustainable community and where older people live. National versus regional local policy plan has to be also be balanced and well organized. More engagement and participation of older people in CCA is imperative at this stage because South Korea has experienced very rapid social change, so current older generation and next older generation has somehow quite different needs and preference and way of living lifestyle. So we need strategy for strengthening the resilience of the Korean aging population by generation and gender by gender and various diversity in older population. And high potential for technology innovation in CCA, but better evidence through rigorous R&D is still very needed. Health and digital literacy of older Korean is a critical factor to make this happen. Just technology itself, focusing on technology development may not work. As I mentioned earlier, baby boomer and current older people different, so we need a new generation, we need a new policy and service strategy. I think this is my last slide. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Kim. You gave us a very comprehensive pictures how the climate change impact for the older generation, older population. So now we're going to invite the last speaker from the Indonesia YAKKUM, Ms. Sari Mutia Timur. Are you here? Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, welcome. So you have a floor now. Please present your presentation in 20 minutes.
And you can see my screen now.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you for being invited to this important and interesting forum, and congratulations to the organizer on their effort to make this event. And this presentation will share about the problem of older people in Indonesia during disaster and then the next approach. I'm from Indonesia and work for NGO with the mandate for emergency response, disaster risk reduction, and climate change adaptation. So this is the problem of older person in Indonesia. First is economic problem. As you can see, there is decreased work productivity and limited job opportunities and lack of social security. And poverty is the biggest welfare threat for older people because of low income, poor health and nutrition, and reduced access to basic services. And second problem is health problem. There is decreased physical and mental abilities. This causes the need for health services increase, of course, because of there is degenerative diseases. And the third problem is social, resulting from changes in the life pattern, family system, social values, and neglect of victim of violence and social exclusion. And of course, poverty of children or family often causes the older people to be neglected. And usually, older people feel there is transition from working to retirement, and there is productivity decreases leads to income decreases, and physical condition decreases leads to health cost increase. And this feeling of older people make the older people is vulnerable to live in poverty, and of course will impact the quality of life and community resilience. And in Indonesia, we have a law related with right of older people. We have the right is have the same right in social, national, and state life. get religious and mental spiritual services, get health services, get job opportunities, and get education and training, and get convenience in the use of facilities, including public facilities and infrastructure, for example, shelter or camp, and convenience in legal services and assistance, and also get social protection and social assistance. And on October 2018, during Central Sulawesi disaster, we got support from Health Aids International to do a rapid need assessment for older people, which involved 325 participants. And as you can see the result, there is problem in privacy using public bathroom, and then there is problem also. The older people said the location of the public bathroom is far away, and top of the priority for older people, access to adequate food and safety when assessing humanitarian assistance from violence, including sexual, physical, and financial and emotional, including neglect. And more than third of respondents who had to take regular medication were cut off after the disaster, while 20% of the older people ran out medication less than 3 days. And older people are considered powerless and are not priority for recipient of economic assistance. And actually during the disaster responses, we also give several intervention for the older people. We give basic need and security activities, such as a mobile clinic and distribute hygiene kit for older people, and accessibility audit in IDP camp. And for support the family and community, we have like gym activities and capacity building. With non-directed specialized, we have monthly meeting, of course, with health protocol, but in that time, there is no pandemic, which is involve health cadres in integrated health posts, monthly meeting, and older people can meet the specialists if needed. And learning from psychosocial support, is it important to conduct a need assessment for older people? Determine the type of support or care with in-depth discussion with older people and their family, of course, their caregivers, and discuss also various possibilities, including if there is possibility, if the older people's health will deteriorate. And training for cadres and health workers in dealing with older patients, especially those with dementia. Organizing older people to form groups of older people is step and tool that has a major influence in building resilience. So we call it, the group is intergenerational group. So we use intergenerational approach. Ensure that the information conveyed is clear, and ensure also there is a channel that can be accessed by senior of older or older people to convey their input, their feedback, even their complaint on the services. And we also delivered health intervention, health sector intervention, such as distribution of special needs of older people, diapers, thermos or vacuum flasks, and health service outreach or home visit, cataract surgery, distribution of assistive device such as glasses, walker, tripod, or wheelchair, and also distribution simple medical equipment for older people in integrated health posts and in public health center. And also we help the process of making older people ID card. So actually we not only think about psychosocial, but also health, and also we provide inclusive and accessible toilet in shelter. and also accessible shelter, of course. And we should ensure that older people sleep in the comfortable place, not too low or not directly in the floor. And we also facilitate monthly meeting and facilitate ID card, because during disaster, sometimes older people lose their ID card and document, and even older people do not know they can use the ID card to access the assistance. And through Help Aids International, we also support and facilitate 550 older people in Central Sulawesi to rebuild their economy through older people friendly economic activities such as agriculture, animal husbandry, or open their small shop. And we give training to older people, the training such as asset-based community development. The aim is to facilitate business plan through identification of their potential or local resources and skill, and then they can submit the simple business proposal. And related with disaster preparedness, we give preparedness training involve older people. Since during disaster, usually older people confuse where the assembly point, where the evacuation road or evacuation post, and in the shelter. That's why the disaster preparedness is important for older people. So older people can evacuate independently, and we can provide proper assistance in the disaster. Yeah, we also form older people association in assisted villages. This forum aims to empower older people to become healthy, resilient, and independent through health promotion, service activities, home care, skill improvement, and socio-economic assistance. So what's the next? Because the number of older people in Indonesia is increasing, and also the number of the disaster. So we think about inclusion approach. So inclusion is a comprehensive process that brings about changes in approaches, structures, and strategies in providing assistance and protection to overcome barriers, with the aim of providing the best learning experiences and environment that are fair and participatory. So inclusion is not the same with exclusion, of course, segregation and integration. So inclusion is the process by which everyone, regardless of age, disability, gender, religion, sexual preference, or nationality, can access and participate fully in all activities or service. Inclusion addresses dignity, opportunity, and accommodation. Inclusion also is about changing society to accommodate differences and to combat the discrimination. So that's why inclusion means a right-based approach, which aim to ensure the older person, also people with disabilities and others with special needs, have equal access to basic services and have voice in the development, not only in humanitarian crisis and implementation of the project. And all organizations need to make effort to overcome and remove the barrier. So this inclusion principle, of course, we should ensure that everyone is involved in all stages of the program of or project, and identify and understand the social, economic, environmental, and power dynamic that contribute to exclusion and who is excluded as a result. And be alert, question, and challenge social norm, attitude, and institution, and remove barrier, and create an enabling environment for the implementation of inclusive program. To no harm, of course, we should consider all the possible effects, positive and negative, of the project or program. Monitor, review, and learn. So related with data collection, know who does and does not benefit from humanitarian services, avoid assumption, discrimination, and exclusion. So the key principle of inclusive programs, we should identify who the excluded people are, remove barrier to inclusion, build the capacity of marginalized groups to have their voice heard, recognize the inequality and power dynamic, use participatory approach to engage them, ensure older people association and also disability people organization, and of course community-based organization are involved. Monitor who gets and does not benefit from the humanitarian services provided. And yeah, there is a standard who can give us guidance about humanitarian inclusion. That is humanitarian inclusion standard. Humanitarian inclusion standard will help organization address the critical issue of how to include those most at risk during an emergency and prevent anyone from being left behind. Provide guidance to practitioners and organizations with action that need to be taken to protect, support, and involve older people and people with disabilities. There are guidelines for identifying and overcome barriers to participation and access in various contexts and across program cycles. This standard represents an important step to promote and improve action to meet the needs. So in this standard, there is 9 inclusion standards. Number 1 is identification. Older people are identified to ensure they can access assistance and protection in participatory, appropriate, and relevant manner. So, for example, we provide this aggregated data collection by gender, age, disability, type of disability, and ensure and improve, and of course, utilize the updated aggregated data, start from the local to the national level in the implementation and monitoring with respect to the data protection. Key inclusion number 2 is safe and fair access. Older people have safe and equal access to assistance and protection. For example, we provide inclusive health services, conducting training for cadres, for example, measuring vital signs so they can do it mobile, and availability of assistive devices such as wheelchairs. Key inclusion standard number 3, resilient. Older people are less negatively affected and more prepared and resilient and less at risk after receiving assistance humanity. For example, older people or people with disabilities and other vulnerable people who are at risk related to protection have access to protection services and are protected from the risk of physical and psychological threat. There is psychological first aid training for initial psychological support for people. Key inclusion number 4 related with the knowledge and participation. Older people know their right and participate in decisions that affect their life. For example, during developing the contingency plan, will attended by representative of older people, people with disabilities, children, transgender, women, and other risk group in the village. And key inclusion number 5 related with feedback and complaint. So older people can have access to safe and responsive feedback and accessible complaint mechanism. So then they can give feedback on facilities, infrastructure, or during preparation on inclusive shelter or camp. And also they have dignified to access the water supply, sanitation facilities, hygiene promotion activities, and make sure the early warning or shelter can be accessed by the deaf, the blind, using the, for example, emergency light, and also make sure there is accessibility audit. The inclusion number 6, related with coordination. Older people have access to and participate in coordinated and complementary humanitarian assistance. For example, during provide healthy nutrition, older people, people with disabilities, and other vulnerable have access to nutrition services and facilities, and collaborated with the public kitchen volunteers to have understanding about balanced nutrition. And key inclusion number 7 about learning. Organization can collect and apply lessons learned to provide more inclusive assistance. For example, related to education and information dissemination, not only staff, but also older people, people with disabilities, and other most at-risk group can join, can attend the capacity building activities. And also we provide appropriate reasonable accommodations, such as sign language interpreter, accessible meeting room, provide transportation for participants. And information material also adjusted according to the type of barriers. And especially in camp or shelter, maybe we can think about the announcement uses running text, and also provide accessible feedback mechanism. And in livelihood activities, older people can have access to the livelihood activities. And key inclusion number 8, related human resources. Staff and volunteers have appropriate skill and attitudes to implement the inclusive humanitarian action. And they also, the older people and persons with disabilities, have equal opportunities to work and apply as volunteer in humanitarian organization. And the last, the key inclusion number 9, management resources. Older people and people with disabilities can expect the humanitarian organization manage resources in a way that promotes inclusion. For example, establish its friendly policy and budgeting. Yeah, so we need to have collaboration start from not only from local level, but also national, regional, and global level. And we also need to emphasize the importance of information management, which is when we disseminate the information, we make sure we use various communication channels. For example, direct socialization, WhatsApp group, door-to-door, and poster of leaflet. And we also have reporting both internally in YEU and also with relevant stakeholder, with government, with a ministry or agency. And we also should document and follow up the response and complaint received. So we should think about cross-sector issues, not only health sector, which is we also think about care management, cash transfer program access, fulfillment of the right, and capacity building. So the last slide, we just emphasize the detailed data identification needs to be done, because so far the data in community sometimes has not been updated, utilized, even there is no disaggregated data. And we should ensure there is participation of most at-risk group in every policy making and planning. And accessibility audit conducted before a disaster occurs so that input from the risk group can be accommodated. And documenting lesson learned in handling the disaster response so that it can be passed down from generation to generation and become disaster literacy. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Director Timur. So it's a really, really marvelous information. So I learned a lot from, the YAKKUM's experience. So now we open the floor for the question and answer session. So if there is no question from the internet and the floor, I'll give the 3 questions for each speakers. So Ms. Fatimah, you wait for a long time. So there's one question, so it's the initial questions for you. The philosophy of the national policy on older persons seems to be based on a human rights-based approach to older population. It is uncommon to find a human rights-based approach to older population, particularly in the government, the policies for middle-income countries like Malaysia and other Asian countries. So for instance, many countries, including the Korean government, so Professor Kim already mentioned about that, so tend to prioritize the expansion of welfare services in their policies for older persons rather than seeing them as an agencies with the right to dignity. Could you explain how and why the Malaysian government adopt the human rights-centered national policy for older persons? How is this reflected in the Malaysian government responses to the needs of older persons in climate change and natural disasters? So now you have a microphone.
Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank
Please
you.
go ahead.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I really appreciate that, and thank you for person who asked about that. Yeah, Malaysia, one of the philosophy that I mentioned just now is about one of the core or pillar to adopt the philosophy on Malaysian national policy for all the person is about human rights. Why we Malaysians really encourage on that part? Because we believe that all the person we have to treat them same with others, right? So they also Malaysian citizens, they have the rights, and the most important things in Malaysia, nobody left behind. So this part's on a national policy for all the person which is developed on 2011. So now we are in process to review that because we are going to inline or highlighted similar under the 12th Malaysia Plan, which is under 12th Malaysia Plan, we are highlighted in terms of inclusivity and also the equality of the persons in Malaysia. So the impact of the national policy for all the persons in terms of human rights is the first thing, all the person, we work together. We are in process to encourage all the elderly to be together with the nation, develop the countries. And for your information, right now, under the new Prime Minister of Malaysia, we are come out with the one tagline, we are family or Malaysian family, or in Malay is about Keluarga Malaysia. So with this tagline, we believe that all the persons, all citizens in Malaysia, we work together to develop the country, especially after we are facing the pandemic COVID-19. And I would like also to highlight, in terms of national policy for all the person, we also have the plan of action for all the person, and I believe there's good same things in Korea and other countries, which is on all the percent and national policy for all the percent. The first important things is about the development of humans itself, human rights, right? The first objective of the national policy for all the persons is to develop a caring society. This is the most pillar that we believe, how to develop and to encourage all the persons to work together with the governments and with the governments to set up and to build our country. And as well, I also would like to highlight on the capacity building of the society to face the aging phenomena, which is faced all over the world, and also to mainstreaming aging in the nation developmental agenda, and address is one of the strategies in the plan of actions. I think I answered the questions. Right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. So the government led, the national policies for the older persons. Actually, the Malaysian government tried to focus on the older person based on the human rights. So that's a very, much important point for the experience of Malaysian government. So I'll give this, question for the second speaker, Professor Kim. So you explain about the climate change adaptation, how it impacts for the government policy for the older population. So while climate change can have immense impact on older people's health, linking these two things are not commonly understood yet. So it seems quite impressive to see that the Korean government addressed the needs of older persons in the context of climate change, and it disproportionately impact on older persons, and particularly among older persons in more vulnerable conditions, such as those living alone, etc. So can you tell us how importantly the protection of older persons in climate change is considered amongst the government officials and policymakers, the legislature? For example, in Korea, are there any plans for large-scale investments in these areas?
Yes, Chairman. I think it's an interesting question and important. And I think the climate change and population aging both well recognize the high risk of the society. But as I mentioned in my presentation earlier, the level what we have been now is they are vulnerable. Just we are aware of it, but we can move more forward. But as I mentioned, their physical and social vulnerability, because in the very fast social development, the current older people have limited financial protection, and their health is also much vulnerable than younger. So we have to go beyond the identify their vulnerability. We have to more consolidated action plan how to protect age sensitive, how older people's own needs, how they can be reflected in climate change adaptation plan. And I think, in the recent national plan, the 5-year plan, in that plan, it is also include and identify clearly the older people and also women as a vulnerable group. So the efforts has been continued, but somehow we need a jump of a new perspective how to incorporate in their own perspective, because the protection has to be the key message how we deal with aging and climate change together in Korean policy document. That's basically true, but in more other countries' experience, I think engagement and other aspects, we have to understand all the people's view and have to better knowledge and information and make a real action to make our plan move to the next stage. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will, give the more questions after the, speaker, Ms. Timur, the question. I will give you the question. It is really very interesting. When the tsunami occurred in the year of 2004, one of my friends actually immediately go back to Indonesia, to Yogyakarta, to help her relatives and her community members. So I was so touched and impressed at that time. So the natural disaster issue in Indonesia, I think, is very, very much important and critical and issues. So it is really interesting to see the YAKKUM emergence. I really want to know about what is the YAKKUM project itself, basically. So I think you better to explain more about the YAKKUM itself after I give my questions. So the YAKKUM emergency unit works to articulate initiative to build community resilience through community-led disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. This appears to be the movement from below to empower all the person's ability to respond to climate change and natural disaster. What is the relation between YEU and the government? Is the work of YEU complementary to the government or filling the gap that the government does not provide? What is the key benefit of build community-led disaster risk reduction in the opposition to other government-led initiatives, and how have all the persons received YEU's initiatives? Can you share examples and case where the community-based disaster risk reduction work well in an emergency situation? So please start from the explaining more, information of the YAKKUM is, NGO, initiatives.
Yeah, thank you. YAKKUM Emergency, as I said, YAKKUM Emergency Unit is an NGO based in Yogyakarta, actually. Like I said, we have mandate in emergency response and disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. Of course, we already registered under government, and our role is also like complementary and fill the gap with the government. So during disaster risk reduction, we also hand in hand with government to make sure all the most at-risk group have equal access and can involve and participate. So yeah, we established since 2001 actually. So yeah, during Yogyakarta earthquake, actually I still in Aceh because we have another disaster also before. Yeah, so related with your question about government, like I said, we are not competitor. We agree, we support the government, we fill the gap. For example, during disaster, maybe the first time of disaster, the health system is collapsed. So we provide mobile clinic. But then during the health system of government already started, we close our mobile clinic, but we will have a home visit because sometimes like older people, bedridden person, and people with disability who have a limited mobility, they have difficulty to access the health services of government. But then we provide, for example, training and capacity building for health cadre, including the government. That's why, because of course, YEU not always stay in the area of disaster. So we give capacity building for cadre and the family and caregiver, and include the government to how handling the people with disability, older people. For example, like I said, we provide the simple medical equipment, and we also train the cadre how to monitor the vital sign. Include also for example, we train the cadre with the first aid training, because in remote area, we have so many remote area. Actually, the community is the first responder, so they understand how to help the person first help the person before they get fixed clinic or reliable system. That's why actually we collaborate the community and the health also. We have we call it diamond approach. For example, the first diamond, the first step is give training the community. For example, medical first aid and the livelihood. So give training, we increase the knowledge and skill. And then the second step, we will give a small stimulant, just small fund. So let the community practice to use the small grant to practice their knowledge, to practice their plan. For example, when they develop the contingency plan, they of course they have plan and then they practice. And then the second step, they will link the community to the government or relevant stakeholder, even the public sector and another relevant stakeholder. And then the last step, since they have knowledge and skill, they have confidence because they already practice and we link it to the relevant stakeholder. The people, the older people, people with disability, even women can have confidence and can join and participate in decision-making meeting. Because of course, where you're not always in the area, for example, in Aceh, we not always stay in Aceh, but we will give training and legacy for the community. That's it.
Thank you so much for all the deep knowledge and experience-based information. So I give a second floor question for all three speakers in the same questions about the gender perspective. How do you distinguish how do you collect, how do you collect and assess the women's and men's different needs and interests and priorities? So when you design your national strategy, for example, the Malaysian government, and when you design and implementing the program and project in YAKKUM project in the community-based activities, and the national strategies and new plans for the climate adaptation based new strategy. How do you actually assess the gender standpoint? So please provide if you have an initiative already you got, or if you have a plan for the future, please feel free to provide any information for us. So I think Ms. Salleh, you can start first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Right. Okay, in terms of gender perspective, this is a very good question, so I really like it. Okay. In Malaysia, we have first, it's about the gender budgeting, the gender budgeting. In terms of budget, and in Malaysia, this Friday, the government will announce a national budget, right? So when we did the budget, so we are really concerned about the gender budgeting. As long as for the older person, what we are care is about how, the first important thing is the rights of the older persons, right? So based on that, we are doing mapping and then do a research to ensure that the older person, we know their rights and the equality, right? Between the older women elderlies and as well as men elderlies. That's the first thing. The second one is about the accessibility, right? We know the accessibility for the older person is different. And the difference, we have to look between gender, Maybe men and women, we need the same accessibility, but in terms of degree of the accessibility, I believe that is different. So based on that, we in Malaysia, we are highlighted in terms of universal design. universal design to ensure that all the elder persons, especially in the of a gender perspective, they have their own rights and they will feel and they enjoy all the facilities that is providing either by the government or others party. So this is what we are thinking about the gender perspective, especially for older person, as well as during disaster. We also come out one special standard operating procedure to cover or to entertain the older person during disaster. That means older persons, men, older persons and women, older persons, they have a different treatment, right? Because we are going to ensure that during the disaster, they're healthy, they are conducive, their situations, they are well taken care. So this is what we are talking about gender perspective. And for the next, for future, and this is the way forward, that under the 12 Malaysia plans as well in the Malaysia, we also highlighted one topic for the gender perspective because we are going to take care the conduciveness and the what we call it the well-being of the elderly. I think that's I would like to highlight on this conference. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, for Korea case.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So we, under the leadership of Ministry of Gender Equality and Family, we have been various efforts to make gender mainstream happen. So in around 2009, Gender Equity Index has been released, and the data to make the index and the result has been released periodically, and the gender index, equity index is at national level and by region. And also around 2010, the gender statistics information system has been also established. So Statistics Korea have been developed and produced various gender-specific, gender-specific data in various ways to make the decision, the policy level and system implementation level. And also the national climate change adaptation plan also clearly mentioned the gender-specific approach needed, and they gather data by gender, by male and female. But I think we have to think about what kind of data that the contents really need, and especially in gender in older people. And the knowledge, the unique knowledge and information and wisdom has to we have to think of further, and just dividing number by male and female, that's what we can do and we are trying to do, and we pretty much in consensus. But to really react and make the better resilience of older people and community level resilience to to respond to the new challenge, the climate change, we have the more sophisticated system and something more action-oriented data and information, I think, are very much needed at this point. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Ms. Timur?
Yeah. So, from some literature said that the number of older women over 80 years is 2 times more than older men. So yeah, we should think about a gender program, but actually we start with the simple because we're still learning ourselves. Like we are planning to have gender age marker next year or next month maybe. Meanwhile, we are doing is ensuring that their need and the expectation can be identified to rapid need assessment, and involve the women and men also in during meeting, and ensure they also can give input, even the complaint, and involve during implementation, such as involved in a special task force for disaster, because older people, men and women, have experience, and also make sure they also involved in monitoring and evaluation. And if there is an opportunity, we will encourage the older people to talk about themselves, about their achievement, their expectation and challenges. And we are, as an NGO, only facilitate, for example, only translate it. Like tomorrow, we have also share and learning in regional level. So I, together with with the community, the older women, and we will have the translation. And actually, we also don't have experience to deal with the transgender or elderly, senior transgender. So we're still learning about the gender program.
Thank you so much. So I think for already the Ms. Salleh who mentioned about the universality, the principle of universality. So but the principle of universality, to go to the universality, we need to check whether the equality, substantive equality, whether the substantive equality guaranteed and provided for the government policies as well as the community-based all the program and project. In that sense, I think the non-discrimination and substantive equality principles is based on the human rights approaches. So how the providers of all the services, whether it's a government side or it's an NGO side or community-led the programs, so how we learn and how we build the capacity. So these non-discrimination and substantive equality-based, universal, principles as a capacity and capability of the provider side. I think this is very much important, stage at this moment. Everything's changed rapidly, and especially the climate. It's not a climate change anymore; it's a climate crisis. It's in a global level. So it goes beyond the national borders and territories. So how we can work together to build our capacity to deal with this, very critical issue of the climate change and natural disaster, to solve these issues. So please, give your experience and your knowledge-based feedback. So I will go round same round. So Ms. Salleh, you can start first. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I would like to highlight in terms of universal design that I mentioned the previous one, right? So in terms of Malaysia, we have a special committee on this, right? To ensure that all the universal design, it was implemented to all, especially to all nations in Malaysia, to all districts, and as well as to all states. Right? We have 15 states in Malaysia and around 158 districts in Malaysia. So we have a special task force, right? And this task force was appointed at every local authority to empower these standards, especially when we provide disaster center for those victims who are involved in the disaster. So this committee will do a monitoring and empowering, and also they did the capacity buildings for the community. So especially now we are in October. In Malaysia, when October, November, and December, this is more on what we call it, the weather is different. So this is a heavy rain, right, in Malaysia right now. So all of us was preparing on to prepare in terms of disaster, especially for the flood, right? So during the preparation for flood, so all the local authority has already completed the train and the capacity building, how to handle the disaster victim. So based on that, all the capacity, all the facilities, especially on governments and the non-government, we work together. We already have a training, We have comprehensive training, how to manage and how to handle disasters during this, what we call it, monsoon right now, on October, December, and November. And the other part, why in Malaysia this is a little bit, right, I can say this is a very successful, because we also both government, in terms of state government and also the federal government, we are support all these teams, especially the task force, in terms of providing the financial aid, right? Because we believe in terms of doing of training, they need lots of money to do this, and to encourage all the community to work together and understand what is the procedures, the rules and regulations during the project, right? So the other one, I would like also to highlight in terms of government support, right? We really happy because in terms of the practice of universal design for the elderly, the government, especially the federal government, we really support on this. And as well, we also come out with special guidelines for those who are really to empower and to practice the universal design. And as well, I would like to highlight also what I mentioned before on the national policy for elderly. This is one chapter on the universal design to highlight to all the committee's members at the community for them to understand. And we also encourage peer group to be one of the indicator to implement and to spread this information. So I think that's what I like to highlight. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I think the participatory approach is very much important, point from the Malaysian, experience. So let's give the floor to the Professor Kim.
Okay. Yeah, the question is really the important one, but it's very challenging question. What you say is the equity principle or human rights principle is pretty well, somehow we can say, documented in paper or plan, but it's not well translated in real life of all the people. And also you specifically ask about the provider side issue. And especially this, the COVID situation is actually brought that issue, and provider used to be considered they have to be more sensitive about providing better care and better education, better awareness. That discussion and comments are still relevant. But the other side, recently, the provider side or the provider and health and social care organization, people are also very much exhausted. They have also very limited budget. They spend their whole time and preventing and protecting people. So and think about the two sides. It's not opponent. We have to all think together what's going on here and how we make the real change happen. And relate this issue, I think recently, yeah, you probably all know the GDP, especially for this Asia country, likely different the European and Western countries, some economic development somehow much well be done, but in our case we have to deal with both economic development and welfare development. And now we have to think about how make the balance better. So GDP is clearly, and we cannot pass that away, but what's the well-being economy somehow, how we make the balance, how we invest our precious resource to make people's well-being going on, and at the same time think about economic development. So, and how we can do, so another different question, how that make happen. And I don't have the clear question, but civil society might work more, and not only civil society, we have to better way to work together, like academician and NGO, civil society, and have better suggestion and better voice, all the people, and we all get together to make government to make a better policy. We can work together in that way. Thank you.
Yeah. So, during the presentation session, you already, all the speakers mentioned about, government and NGO and private sector, partnerships. So I think the partnership and governments especially between the government and NGO, is very much important thing. So the last, speakers, Ms. Timur. So you have a floor now.
Yeah, actually we work in two ways, not only bottom up but also top down. So we are involved in government cluster related on most at-risk group. So we advocate and encourage the government to pay attention of the need of vulnerable groups, including about universal design. But also, on the other hand, we also increase the capacity and skill of the community. So they not only wait and passive. So for example, we providing training for carpenter when how to build the safe, healthy, and accessible building. So they can build the building with minimal material they can find after disaster. And also with support from government, also they can implement the technique how to build the safe, healthy, and accessible houses. And yeah, so they know how to apply universal design and make sure that all communities have equal access. And I agree, this collaboration not only between government and NGO, but also, of course, will involve the academician, the university, and also the private sector. That's it.
Thank you so much to all the speakers. So I think it's almost time, on. So it's a time to close. So before I, close the session, so as a facilitator of this session, I don't have any more, point to add. So I really want to learn from you more and more. So I really feel sorry. So we have, a time limitation. So each speaker has, 1 minute, closing session. I hope to, start from the Professor Tim first, because you always, speak, last time. So please,
Yeah, I think this gathering under COVID pandemic is going on is very, very meaningful and important. And I hope this initiative will go further beyond this symposium. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Salleh.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and as well as all my colleagues, all the panelists. Thank you very much. This is very good. And I also learned lots from both of the panels here. And this is a very good program, and I really hope this ASEM will continue, and as well as this is a very good platform for all of us to learn the best practices from others. And on behalf of Malaysia government, I would like to highlight in terms of national elderly in Malaysia, we are really care all of them. And we really believe that in terms of human rights, this is the pillar of the development and as well as the well-being of the elderly. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So Ms. Timur.
Yeah, an inclusive approach in which older people are also given a role to be involved and provide input. So not only as a passive beneficiaries, at all level and in every disaster cycle and also development. And we should make sure ensure the older people get their right and the need according their condition. Thank you.
Thank you for all three speakers. It's a really, really valuable session, and I learned a lot from all of you. So the session 3, the older persons in climate change and natural disaster, it's a time to close this session. Thank you so much for all the audience from the online, especially for the online. The connection sometimes is not so good, so I really appreciate your patience and your enthusiasm to keep on listen and participate of this session. Thank you so much for everyone. So I'll give microphone to the moderator. Yeah.